Be me, Tammy, 26.
I consider myself pretty sharp.
I'm not one of those girls who falls for every sweet line and pretty lie. I've seen how it works. I've seen my friends get played, get their hearts broken by guys who swore they were different. It's a pattern, a biological imperative almost. Men are wired to take the path of least resistance, and that path is paved with little white lies. It's not even that they're all evil. They just do it to avoid a fight, to get out of something, to make themselves look better. It's like breathing for them. So, when I got with Joe, I decided things would be different. I wasn't going to be the naive girlfriend. I was going to be the partner who builds a foundation of what I call enforced honesty. It sounds intense, but it's simple. It's about creating an environment where lying isn't an option, because everything is out in the open. Joe is a good guy, really. He's kind, he works hard, he's handsome. But he's still a man. The potential is always there. My best friend thinks I'm a genius. She's always telling me she wishes she had my strength to lay down the law. She says I'm building a relationship that can actually last, because it's not based on fantasy, it's based on facts. Our system worked well for the first year or so. It was a process of conditioning, I guess. At first, he was a little defensive. He'd say things like, "Why do you need to know all this?" Or, "Can't you just trust me?" I'd always explain it calmly. It's not about a lack of trust. It's about actively building it. Trust isn't a feeling. It's a series of verified actions. He eventually got it. He learned that the easiest path was just to tell me everything in detail. Like a few months back, he had a team-building dinner with his work. It was supposed to end at 9 p.m. He texted me at 9:15 p.m., saying he was on his way home. He walked in the door at 9:50 p.m. A 40-minute gap for a 20-minute drive. My internal alarm bells didn't scream, but they definitely chimed. I didn't get angry. I just sat him down on the couch and we had a talk. I asked him how the dinner was. He said it was fine, a bit boring. Standard answer. I then asked him what took him so long to get home. He claimed there was traffic. This is what I call a level 1 lie. Plausible, but lazy. So I started my verification process. I asked which route he took. He told me he came down the main boulevard. I casually opened the traffic app on my phone. "Oh, that's weird," I said. It shows green all the way down the boulevard for the last hour. You could see the flicker of panic in his eyes, just for a second. That's the moment the truth starts to surface. He backtracked, said maybe it wasn't traffic. Maybe he just drove slow, listening to a podcast. I asked what podcast. He named one he knew I liked. Smart, but not smart enough. I asked what the episode was about. He started to stumble, trying to remember details from an episode he hadn't actually listened to. Finally, after a few more gentle probing questions, he broke. The truth was, one of his female coworkers, a new girl in his department, had car trouble. Her car wouldn't start. He and another male colleague had waited with her for a tow truck. It was a perfectly innocent explanation. So, why lie? He said he knew I'd get the wrong idea if he mentioned being alone with another woman after dark. I told him that the lie was 1,000,000 times worse than the truth. I explained that by trying to protect me, he was actually disrespecting me and our relationship. He apologized profusely. He showed me the text from the coworker thanking him. Everything checked out. In the end, I wasn't even mad. I was satisfied. The system had worked. It had exposed a lie, brought the truth to light, and we ended the night with a hug and a lesson learned. He understood that it was just easier to be honest from the start. I went to bed feeling secure, vindicated. That was our normal, a series of checks and balances that kept our relationship pure. He'd call me from the parking lot when he left the office, so I could time his commute. He'd send me a picture of his friends when he was out with them, so I knew who was there. He gave me all his passwords without me even having to ask. A sign that he was fully on board with our project of honesty. I never abused it. I only checked his stuff when I had a legitimate reason to be suspicious, a gut feeling. My intuition is very sharp. Most of the time, I found nothing. And that was good. It meant the system was working as a deterrent. But every now and then, I'd find something small. A deleted call to his ex from months ago. He claimed it was a butt dial. A search for a female celebrity's Instagram. Minor infractions, but they prove my point. The male mind is always wandering. Constant vigilance is the only antidote. His best friend Louise was a factor I always had to consider. Louise is single and has that kind of frat boy energy, even though he's almost 30. He was the one who could be a bad influence. Whenever Joe was out with Louise, my verification protocols were at their highest level. I needed to know the exact plan, which bar, who else was coming, what time they expected to be done. Joe called it my itinerary request. He said it teasingly, but I knew he understood its importance. It was all about removing opportunities for bad decisions. If he knew he had to account for every minute of his time, he'd be less likely to do something he shouldn't. This wasn't about controlling him. It was about helping him be his best self for us. It was a stable, predictable, and honest ecosystem we had built. And then, one evening a couple of weeks ago, the whole ecosystem collapsed. It was nothing special. Just a regular week-down night. Joe had mentioned earlier in the day that he and Luis were going to grab a beer after work to decompress. A project they were on had been a nightmare, and they needed to vent. Fine by me. I gave him the usual rundown. Okay, have fun. Just don't be out too late. It's a work night. Text me when you get there, and text me when you're leaving. He agreed. Said he'd probably be home by 10 p.m. At 7:30 p.m., I got the "made it to the bar" text. Good. At 9:45 p.m., I sent a text. Thinking of heading home soon? No reply. 10 p.m. came and went. Silence. 10:15 p.m. I called him. It went to voicemail. Now the alarm bells weren't just chiming. They were ringing. This was a breach of protocol. A big one. My mind started racing through the possibilities. He wasn't in an accident. His phone was on. So, he was ignoring my call. Why? The only reason to ignore a call from your girlfriend is if you're with someone you don't want her to know you're with. The story wrote itself in my head. They met some girls at the bar. He's trying to play it cool. He's being the fun guy for his single friend, Louise. My heart started to beat faster. A mixture of anger and a weird sense of excitement. The thrill of the chase. I knew I'd get the truth out of him. He walked in the door at 10:47 p.m. I was sitting on the couch, phone in my hand, ready. I had my calm, therapeutic voice prepared. He looked tired. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. Hey, he said, avoiding my eyes. Classic guilt behavior. Hey, I replied, keeping my tone even. You're late. I know. Sorry. We got to talking and lost track of time. He started to walk toward the bedroom. I stood up. Whoa, hold on. Let's talk about this. He stopped and turned around, and for the first time, I saw an expression on his face I'd never really seen before. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't annoyance. It was just blankness, emptiness. What's there to talk about? He asked. I'm late. I said I'm sorry. I called you, I said, holding up my phone as evidence. You didn't answer. My phone was in my pocket. It was loud in the bar. I didn't hear it, he said. A flurry of level 1 lies. I was ready. I took a deep breath, prepared to dismantle his story piece by piece, just like all the other times. Which bar did you go to? The usual one. Yeah, the one downtown. It's not usually that loud there on a weeknight, I countered. What was going on?
A special event?
I was trying to box him in, make him trip over his own details. It was the crucial first step, but he didn't take the bait. He just looked at me. The blankness in his eyes was unnerving. Then he said, "I was at the bar with Louise Tammy." "I know that," I said, my frustration growing. "But I need you to understand that your actions have consequences. When you say you'll be home by 10 o'clock and you ignore my call and show up almost an hour late, it makes me think. It makes me worry."
"I'm sorry I made you worry," he said.
The words were right, but the tone was wrong. It was flat, devoid of any real emotion, like he was reading from a script. "So what happened?" I pressed. "Did you meet someone? Did Louise start talking to some girls and you got dragged into it?" This was the part where he was supposed to get defensive, deny it vehemently. And in his over-the-top denial, I would find the seeds of the truth. But he didn't deny it. He didn't do anything. He just stood there for a moment. Then he shrugged. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "No," he said. "Just no." "Not of course not, honey. I would never." "Not? How could you even think that?" Just a single empty word. I was flabbergasted. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how the game was played. "That's it." "Just no?" I asked, my voice rising. "After all this, after ignoring my call and breaking our agreement, all you can say is no?" He met my gaze. The emptiness was still there. It felt like I was looking at a stranger. "I already told you what happened," he said, his voice as steady and flat as a frozen lake. "We went to the bar. We had some beers. We talked. We lost track of time. Then I came home." He turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room. I could hear the shower turning on. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, completely frozen. My brain was working overtime trying to process what had just happened. This was a new strategy. He'd never done this before. The stonewalling, the refusal to engage. It was brilliant in a terrifying way. He wasn't giving me any details to pick apart. He wasn't giving me any emotional reactions to analyze. He was giving me nothing. A perfect smooth wall of non-information. My friend was right all along. I'd read articles about this. This was a classic manipulation tactic, withholding information to make the other person feel crazy. It was a form of toxic masculinity I hadn't encountered firsthand before. He was trying to punish me for holding him accountable. I felt a surge of cold fury. Oh, he wanted to play games. Fine, I knew how to play. I went to bed that night feeling a strange mix of fear and resolve. He had changed the rules of the game, but I would learn the new ones. I would find the truth. I always did. The next morning was surreal. He acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee. He asked me if I needed anything from the store on his way home from work. It was a performance. He was pretending to be the perfect normal boyfriend to throw me off the scent. I played along. I was polite, but distant. I needed him to know that I wasn't just going to forget his behavior. Throughout the day, my mind was a whirlwind of theories. The most likely scenario was that he had developed a new, more sophisticated system for hiding his tracks. Maybe Luis was his accomplice, providing alibis. Maybe there was another woman, someone he'd been seeing for a while, and he was tired of the effort of creating elaborate lies. So he'd switched to this new, less is more strategy. The more I thought about it, the more it made a terrifying kind of sense. The old Joe, the one who over-explained and got flustered, was easy to read. This new, calm, detached Joe was a black box. When he came home from work that evening, I was ready for round 2. I decided to take a different approach. The direct confrontation had failed. Now, I would try a more subtle investigative method. We were cooking dinner together. I kept the conversation light, talking about my day, about a funny article I read. Then, as casually as I could, I said, "You know, I was thinking about what you said last night, about the bar being loud. Was there a band playing or something?" I was watching his face closely, looking for any micro-expressions, any telltale sign of deception. He didn't even look up from chopping vegetables. "I don't remember," he said. "You don't remember if there was a live band in the bar you were in for 3 hours?" I asked, a hint of incredulity in my voice. "I wasn't paying attention to that," he replied, his tone still perfectly neutral. "I was talking to Louise." It was maddening. Every question I asked was met with a simple, logical, but ultimately unhelpful answer. He was building a fortress around the truth, and every brick was a non-committal statement. I tried another angle. "What did you and Louise even talk about for so long?" "Must have been something important." "Just work stuff mostly." "The project," he said. "For 3 hours? Just work?" He finally looked at me. "Yeah," he said. "It was a stressful week." Then he went back to the vegetables. The conversation was over. He had shut it down again. This pattern continued for days. It was like living with a polite, helpful robot who looked like my boyfriend. All our old rituals of connection, which were really my moments of verification, were gone. He stopped telling me little details about his day. When I asked, he gave one-sentence summaries. He stopped leaving his phone face up on the table. He kept it in his pocket. He wasn't being secretive in an obvious way. It was more subtle. It was an absence of transparency. I felt like I was losing my mind. The lack of data was more stressful than finding a lie. When I had evidence of a lie, I had a problem to solve. I had a puzzle to piece together. I was in control. Now I had nothing. Just a void of information and a growing sense of dread. My friend told me this was a war of attrition. He was trying to wear me down, to make me so desperate for information that I'd stop asking the hard questions and just accept his non-answers. I told her I would never give up. I was stronger than that. After a week of this Cold War, I knew I had to escalate my tactics. If he wouldn't give me the information willingly, I would have to take it. I waited until he was in the shower. It was a Saturday morning. He usually took a long time. My heart was pounding in my chest as I walked over to his side of the bed. His phone was on the nightstand charging. I picked it up. My hands were shaking slightly. I unlocked it. We'd exchanged fingerprints on our phones ages ago. An early victory in my campaign for transparency. I took a deep breath and started to dig. I went through his texts first. Nothing. His conversations with Luis were all about a video game they were playing. His chats with his mom, messages from his work group. It was boringly normal. I checked his call log. No unknown numbers. No long calls at strange hours. I moved on to his social media. I scoured his DMs on every platform. Nothing. I checked his photo gallery. Pictures of our cat, a few screenshots of recipes, photos from our last vacation. I even went into his recently deleted folder. It was empty. I sat there on the edge of the bed staring at the screen, feeling a profound sense of confusion. It was too clean. Impossibly clean. No man's phone is this clean. It was a digital ghost town. My initial thought was one of deep disappointment. I hadn't found the smoking gun I was so sure was there. But then a new, more sinister theory began to form in my mind. He knew I was going to look. This whole week of stonewalling, this new, detached behavior, it was all a distraction. While I was focused on his attitude, he was meticulously cleaning his tracks, deleting every shred of evidence of his betrayal. The clean phone wasn't a sign of his innocence. It was the ultimate proof of his guilt. It showed foresight, planning, and a deep level of deception I had never thought him capable of. The sound of the shower turning off jolted me back to reality. I quickly closed all the apps and put the phone back on the nightstand, exactly as I had found it. I hurried out of the bedroom, my heart racing with a terrifying new certainty. I wasn't just dealing with a casual liar anymore. I was dealing with a master manipulator. My resolve hardened. This was no longer just about saving my relationship. This was about exposing him, about proving that my intuition had been right all along. The game had reached a whole new level, and I was determined to win. I spent the rest of that weekend in a state of hyper-alertness. I watched him. I studied his every move, every word, every subtle shift in his expression. It was like watching a spy in a movie. He was flawless. He played the part of the normal, attentive boyfriend almost perfectly. He suggested we watch a movie. He made popcorn. He put his arm around me on the couch, but I could feel the difference. It was a performance. There was no real warmth behind it. It was a calculated effort to lull me into a false sense of security. I played along. I leaned into him. I laughed at the funny parts of the movie, but inside my mind was a supercompute analyzing everything. The way he angled his body slightly away from me. The way he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, even though I knew there was nothing to see on it. It was the habit of a cheater. I felt like a detective on the verge of cracking a major case. My best friend was my only confidant. I told her about the meticulously clean phone. She was horrified, but not surprised. Of course, she said. That's exactly what a guilty man would do. He's not just cheating, Tammy. He's mocking you. He's leaving a clean phone as a message to make you doubt yourself. Her validation was like a shot of adrenaline. I wasn't crazy. I was seeing things for what they were. I decided my next move had to be more creative. His digital life was a dead end. I had to look for evidence in the physical world. On Monday, I told him I was feeling unwell and was going to work from home. He showed the appropriate amount of concern. He offered to stay home with me, a clever move to try and thwart my investigation. But I was one step ahead. I insisted he go to work, that I just needed to rest. As soon as I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I launched Operation Deep Clean. I started in our bedroom. I went through his drawers, his closet. I checked the pockets of every pair of pants, every jacket. I found nothing but old receipts and lint. I looked under the mattress, behind the headboard. Nothing. I moved to his car. I spent a full hour searching it. I looked in the glove compartment, under the seats, in the trunk. I even checked the spare tire. Well, I found a few stray French fries and an old map. It was another dead end. I came back inside, feeling a fresh wave of frustration. He was good. Incredibly good. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to think like him. Where would he hide something? Where would I never think to look? My eyes drifted to the bookshelf in the living room. It was filled with his old college textbooks and fantasy novels, a place I never paid any attention to. I walked over to it and started pulling books out one by one, shaking them, fanning through the pages. In the third book I checked, a thick, dusty tome on some obscure historical subject. A small piece of paper fell out. My heart leaped. This was it. I picked it up. It was a receipt. It was from a coffee shop on the other side of town, a place we never went to. The date on it was from the previous Tuesday, the day of the infamous Beer with Louise night. The timestamp was 7:15 p.m. He had texted me at 7:30 p.m. saying he had made it to the bar. But the most damning detail was the order. It was for 2 lattes. Joe doesn't drink lattes. He drinks black coffee or beer. I'm the one who drinks lattes. Or perhaps another woman. I held the receipt in my hand. It was a small, flimsy piece of paper, but it felt as heavy as a stone tablet. This was it, the smoking gun. He hadn't been at the bar with Luis at 7:15. He had been at a coffee shop with a woman. The whole story about the bar was a lie, a cover for his real rendezvous. I took a picture of the receipt with my phone, evidence. I carefully placed it back in the book and put the book back on the shelf. I didn't want him to know I had found it. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. The rest of the day, I felt a strange sense of calm. The uncertainty was gone. Now I had a fact, a hard piece of evidence that he couldn't explain away with a one-word answer. When he came home from work, I was perfectly pleasant. I asked about his day. I didn't let any of my discovery show on my face. I was going to let him dig his own grave a little deeper before I buried him in it. A few days passed. I waited for the right moment. I wanted to confront him when he was relaxed, unsuspecting. Friday night seemed perfect. We had ordered a pizza. We were sitting on the couch watching a show. It was a picture of domestic tranquility. A complete lie. During a commercial break, I turned to him with a curious expression. "Hey, random question," I said, my tone light and breezy. "You know that coffee shop, The Grind, over on the west side? Have you ever been there?" I saw it. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. "I don't think so," he said, turning his attention back to the TV. "Why?" "Oh, a coworker was just telling me they have the best lattes," I said. "I was thinking we should check it out sometime." "Sure," he said, his voice a little too casual. He was lying. He knew exactly what place I was talking about. I let the topic drop. I had planted the seed. Now, I would let it sprout. The next step in my plan involved Luis. He was the accomplice. He had to be. His text message forwarding my query to Joe was proof that they were in this together. I had to find a way to break their alliance. I knew Luis was proud of his car. It was his baby. He was always posting pictures of it. On Saturday, I told Joe I was going to meet my friend for lunch. Instead, I drove to the neighborhood where I knew Luis lived. I parked down the street and waited. It was a long shot, but my intuition was on fire. After about an hour, I saw Luis come out of his apartment building and get into his car. I followed him. He drove to a local park. He got out of his car and started walking toward a group of guys setting up for a game of flag football. This was my chance. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I drove up and parked behind his car. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was crazy. This was crossing a line. But I had to know the truth. I got out of my car and walked over to his. I had a small nail in my pocket. I bent down by his front passenger side tire. I could hear the cheers from the football game in the distance. My hand was shaking as I pressed the nail into the tire's sidewall. I didn't puncture it completely, just enough to create a slow, undeniable leak. I stood up, my task complete. I felt a sick thrill, a sense of power. I got back in my car and drove away. I went home and waited. I was playing a dangerous game, but the stakes were too high to back down. Around 5 p.m., my phone rang. It was Joe. "Hey," he said. "Weird question. Are you anywhere near Central Park?" "No, I'm home," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of innocence. "Why?" "Louise is stuck there. He got a flat tire and he doesn't have a spare. I was going to go help him, but I'm in the middle of a project here at home. I was just wondering if you were closer." It was working. It was all falling into place. "Oh, that's terrible," I said with genuine-sounding sympathy. "No, I'm sorry. I can't help. I just got out of the shower." "Okay, no problem. I'll figure something out," he said and hung up. I sat there, a smile spreading across my face. I had successfully isolated the target. Now that Luis was distracted and out of the picture, it was time to close in on Joe. I gave it another hour. Then I walked into the living room where Joe was fixing a wobbly leg on a bookshelf. I held my phone in my hand, the picture of the receipt on the screen. I decided to start the final interrogation. So I got bored earlier and was doing some decluttering. I began, my voice calm and steady. I was going through some of the old books on the shelf.
He didn't look up from his work.
Yeah. And I found something interesting. I walked over and showed him my phone. He glanced at the screen. He saw the receipt. He stopped what he was doing. He slowly stood up and looked at me. The blankness was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by something else. Something I couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger. It was more like disappointment. "You went through my things," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I was looking for the truth. I shot back, feeling a surge of righteous power. "Something you've been refusing to give me." He looked from the phone back to my face. "And what truth do you think you found, Tammy?" "I found proof that you're a liar," I said, my voice trembling slightly with the force of my conviction. "You weren't at the bar with Luis that night. You were at this coffee shop with someone else. Someone you bought a latte for." I had him. He was cornered. There was no way he could talk his way out of this one. I waited for the confession, the apologies, the begging. He was silent for a long moment. He just looked at me. Then he let out a long, slow sigh. It was the sound of a man completely and utterly defeated. "You're right," he said softly. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. I was at that coffee shop, he continued, his voice heavy with resignation. And I did lie about it. "Who was she?" I demanded, the name a burning question on my tongue. He shook his head slowly. "It wasn't a she," he said. "I was meeting with a headhunter." I stared at him confused. "A what?" "A recruiter," he explained. "For a new job." The initial meeting was supposed to be a secret. I didn't want to tell anyone, not even you, until I knew if it was a real opportunity. I didn't want to get your hopes up for nothing. I was speechless. "A job interview? The latte?" I stammered. "You don't drink lattes." "I know," he said. I was nervous. I saw it on the menu and just ordered the first thing I saw. I didn't even drink it. The story was plausible. Too plausible. It was a perfectly constructed lie designed to cover all the bases. And Luis, I challenged. He lied for you. He was your alibi. Joe looked down at the floor. I didn't tell him the truth either. I just told him I needed him to cover for me for an hour. That I had to take care of something personal, and I didn't want you to worry. He's my best friend. He trusted me. He looked back up at me, and now I could see the emotion in his eyes. It was hurt. Deep, profound hurt. "I was going to tell you everything this weekend," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I got a second interview. It's a huge opportunity, a big step up. I was going to surprise you with the good news." I stood there, the whole narrative I had so carefully constructed crumbling around me. But I couldn't let it go. It still didn't explain everything. "But why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why did you change? Why did you stop talking to me?" He looked at me as if I had asked the most obvious question in the world. "Because I was tired, Tammy," he said. I was so tired. "Tired of what?" "Of the tests," he said, his voice gaining a bit of strength. "Of the interrogations. Of having to justify every minute of my day. Of living in a constant state of being a suspect in my own life." He gestured around the room. "Our entire relationship has become a courtroom, and I am always on trial. And I realized I can't win. It doesn't matter if I'm innocent, because you don't want innocence. You want guilt. Your whole system is designed to find it, even if it has to invent it." He picked up a screwdriver from the floor. That night, when I came home late from the bar, I really did just lose track of time talking with Louise after my meeting. And when you started questioning me, I just couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have the energy to present my case, to provide a mountain of evidence to prove something so simple. "So I just stopped," he said. I decided to stop explaining myself. I wanted to see what would happen if I just told the simple truth without all the decorations you require. He looked directly into my eyes, and now I see. What happens is this. You tear apart my life. You go through my private things. You vandalize my friend's property. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Luis called me when he was waiting for the tow truck, Joe said, his voice dangerously quiet. He found a nail in his tire, a clean puncture in the sidewall. He said it looked deliberate. Funny, isn't it? The timing of it all. I had no words. I couldn't deny it. The truth was written all over my face. A tear rolled down his cheek.
Just one.
I lied about meeting a recruiter to avoid one of your interrogations, he said. But you did all of this because you enjoyed the interrogation itself. He looked at me one last time with a look of finality and pity. You don't want an honest man, Tammy, he said. You want a man who is constantly confessing, and I have nothing left to confess. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. His words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. You want a man who is constantly confessing. The accusation echoed in my head. It was absurd. It was the opposite of what I wanted. I wanted a man who had nothing to confess, because he was honest from the start. But looking at his face, at the raw pain and exhaustion in his eyes, I felt a crack form in the foundation of my certainty. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain, to tell him he was wrong, that he was twisting everything. I wanted to tell him that all my actions, as extreme as they might seem, were born from a desire to protect us, to build something real. But no words came out. What could I say? He knew about the tire. He knew I had systematically dismantled his privacy. He saw my actions not as a desperate search for truth, but as a cruel and obsessive game. I started, but my voice failed me. He didn't wait for me to finish. He turned away and went back to the bookshelf, his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't throwing things. That I could have handled. An angry fight would have been familiar territory. It would have been a battle I knew how to wage. This was worse. This was a quiet, final judgment. He picked up his tools and put them back in the toolbox, snapping it shut with a click that sounded like a gavel. He walked past me and went into the bedroom. I didn't follow. I just stood there, rooted to the spot in the living room, feeling the room tilt on its axis. I heard drawers opening and closing, the soft sound of clothes being folded, the zip of a duffel bag. The sounds were so mundane, so normal, but they were the soundtrack to the end of my world. He was leaving. It was actually happening. A wave of panic, cold and sickening, washed over me. No, this wasn't how it was supposed to end. The plan was for him to break down, confess his infidelity, and then we would work through it. I would be hurt, but I would be magnanimous in my forgiveness. Our relationship would be stronger, rebuilt on the ashes of his lies. But he wasn't confessing to infidelity. He was accusing me. He had flipped the entire script. He walked out of the bedroom a few minutes later with a bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look at me. He walked to the front door and picked up his keys from the bowl. The reality of the situation finally hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Wait," I said, my voice. "Joe, wait, you can't just leave." He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, but he didn't turn around. "What do you want me to do, Tammy?" he asked, his back still to me. "Stay here and wait for the next test. Wonder what you'll do next time I'm 5 minutes late. Worry that you're going to call my boss to verify my lunch break." "It won't be like that," I pleaded, taking a step toward him. "I understand now." I went too far. "I can change." He finally turned to face me. The look on his face was one of profound sadness. "No, you can't," he said, and there was no malice in his voice, only a deep, weary conviction. This isn't just something you do. This is who you are. You see the world as a hostile place full of liars, and you think the only way to survive is to be the chief interrogator. That's not true, I sobbed, tears finally starting to stream down my face. Isn't it? He asked gently. Think about it. In our entire relationship, has there ever been a moment where you've just trusted me without needing proof, without a nagging feeling that there was something more you needed to uncover? I tried to think of one, but I couldn't. Every memory of trust was attached to a verification that had cleared him. My trust was never a gift. It was a verdict I delivered after a thorough investigation. I love you, I said, the words feeling clumsy and desperate. He gave me a sad, small smile. I know, he said. That's the craziest part. I think you actually do. But your love feels like being in a cage, a very well-monitored, secure cage, but still a cage. He opened the door. The hallway light spilled into our dim living room. Where will you go? I asked, my voice small. I'll stay with Luis for a while, he said. He probably won't be too happy about it when I tell him what you did to his car, but I think he'll understand. The mention of Luis was like another twist of the knife. I had tried to isolate Joe, and in the end, I had only succeeded in isolating myself. I had one last card to play, one last-ditch effort. So what about the job? I asked. The new opportunity. You're just going to throw that away? I thought maybe the shared dream of a better future could pull him back. He looked at me, and for the first time, a flicker of something hard, like steel, appeared in his eyes. The new job is in another city, he said quietly. The floor dropped out from under me. I was going to ask you to move with me, he continued. But how could I? How could I ask you to come to a new city where you know no one, where you would have no one to rely on but me, the person you are fundamentally incapable of trusting? He shook his head. It wouldn't be a new start for us. It would just be a new, smaller prison for you to patrol. He didn't say anything else. He just looked at me for a second longer, a look that I would replay in my mind 1,000 times. It was a look of goodbye. Then he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I stood there in the empty apartment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. I didn't cry anymore. I was numb. I walked over to the couch and sat down. The pizza we had been eating was still on the coffee table, half eaten. The TV was still on, playing some mindless sitcom with a laugh track. It felt like a scene from someone else's life. I thought back to the beginning, my system, my project of enforced honesty. It had all made so much sense in my head. It was logical. It was scientific. It was designed to prevent the very heartbreak I was now experiencing. My methods were supposed to expose the liar. But what if there was never a liar to begin with? What if I had taken a good, honest man and put him under so much pressure, subjected him to so much suspicion, that I had forced him to lie just to get a moment of peace? The lie about the headhunter. He did that to avoid the inevitable interrogation. A lie born not of deceit, but of exhaustion. And when he got tired of even that, when he decided to just stop playing the game, I hadn't seen it as a move toward honesty. I had seen it as a declaration of war. I had been so obsessed with searching for his toxic behavior that I had been completely blind to my own. My friend's voice echoed in my head, all her validation and encouragement. You're a genius, Tammy. He's mocking you. It's a war of attrition. She wasn't my confidant. She was my echo chamber. She had cheered me on as I drove my own relationship off a cliff. I picked up my phone to call her, to scream at her, to blame her. But I stopped. It wasn't her fault. It was mine. I was the one who had flattened a human being into a theory. I had stripped him of all nuance and complexity and turned him into a walking, talking stereotype man. the liar. And when he refused to play the part I had written for him, I had destroyed everything to try and force him back into that role. The truth wasn't that he had broken me by telling the truth. The truth was that I had broken myself with my own lies. The lies I told myself about control and trust and what it really means to love someone. I sat there in the dark for a long time. The laugh track on the TV kept playing, a hollow, mocking sound in the crushing silence of my new reality. I had won. I had finally found the truth. The truth was that I was completely and utterly alone.